Welcome to Mr. Beebop. Three-Act Tragedy is a work of detective fiction by British writer Agatha Christie, first published in the United States by Dodd, Mead and Company in 1934, under the title Murder in Three Acts, and in the UK by the Collins Crime Club in January 1935, under Christie's original title. The book features Hercule Poirot, supported by his friend Mr. Satterthwaite, and is the one book in which Satterthwaite collaborates with Poirot. Satterthwaite previously appeared in the stories featuring Harley Quin. Following the theme of a Roman tragedy, the novel is divided into three acts: Act 1, Suspicion; Act 2, Certainty; Act 3, Discovery. Here are some interesting facts and trivia about the novel.
Literary reception.
The Times Literary Supplement of January 31, 1935, admitted that very few readers will guess the murderer before Hercule Poirot reveals the secret, but complained that the motive of the murderer injures an otherwise very good story. Isaac Anderson, in the New York Times Book Review of October 7, 1934, said that the motive was most unusual, if not positively unique, in the annals of crime. Since this is an Agatha Christie novel featuring Hercule Poirot as its leading character, it is quite unnecessary to say that it makes uncommonly good reading. In the Observer's issue of January 6, 1935, Edward Powys Mathers said, "Her gift is pure genius, of leading the reader by the nose in a zigzag course up the garden, and dropping the lead just when she wishes him to scamper to the kill." Three-Act Tragedy is not among this author's best detective stories, but to say that it heads her second best is praise enough. The technique of misleadership is, as usual, superb, but, when all comes out, some of the minor threads of motive do not quite convince. Mrs. Christie has, quite apart from her special gift, steadily improved and matured as a writer, from The Strange Affair of Style to this charming and sophisticated piece of prose. Millward Kennedy, in The Guardian of January 29, 1935, opened his review with, "The year has opened most satisfactorily." Mrs. Christie's three-act tragedy is up to her best level. He summarized the setup of the plot but then added, "A weak, but perhaps inevitable point, is the disappearance of a butler." The reader, that is to say, is given rather too broad a hint. But the mechanics of the story are ingenious and plausible. The characters, as always with Mrs. Christie, are lifelike and lively. Poirot does not take the stage very often, but when he does, he is in great form. Robert Barnard commented much later that the strategy of deception here is one that, by this date, ought to have been familiar to Christie's readers. This is perhaps not one of the best examples of the trick, because few of the characters other than the murderer are well individualized. The social mix here is more artistic and sophisticated than is usual in Christie.
References in other works.
Colonel Johnson alludes to the events of this story in Hercule Poirot's Christmas. Poirot also refers to the events of this novel in the ABC Murders when he and Arthur Hastings reunite after not seeing each other for several years. Poirot is telling Hastings about his experiences since retiring. He relates that he was almost exterminated himself recently by a murderer who was not so much enterprising as careless.
References to other stories.
In Act 3, Chapter 5, Poirot says that once he had a failure in his professional career that happened in Belgium, hinting at the story The Chocolate Box. In Act 2, Chapter 1, Poirot makes a hint to the mysterious affair at Styles while talking to Satterthwaite. In the end of Act 2, Chapter 3, Satterthwaite tells Sir Charles Cartwright that it is not the first time that he is investigating crimes. He is just starting to tell about the events of the story, at the Bells and Motley, when Sir Charles interrupts him and starts to tell his own story. In Act 2, Chapter 1, Sir Charles Cartwright discusses reserving a compartment on the Blue Train to travel from France to England. This is the titular train from another Poirot mystery, The Mystery of the Blue Train, published in 1928.
Synopsis.
Renowned stage actor Sir Charles Cartwright hosts a dinner party at his home in Cornwall. When the Reverend Babington suddenly dies after sipping one of the cocktails being served, Cartwright believes it was murder, though no poison was found in his glass. Sometime later, Poirot is in Monte Carlo and hears news from Satterthwaite and Cartwright that in another house party with the same group of people, a guest died from nicotine poisoning after drinking a glass of port wine, despite there being no trace in the glass. Both Satterthwaite and Cartwright return to England to investigate the murders, joined by Poirot as a consultant.
Characters.
Hercule Poirot. Renowned Belgian detective. A friend of Sir Charles. Sir Charles Cartwright. Well-known stage actor, and Poirot's assistant in his investigations. Mr. Satterthwaite. A sociable and observant man. Assists in initially investigating the case on Poirot's behalf. Reverend Babington. First victim of the case. A local vicar in Cornwall, murdered during a cocktail party organized by Sir Charles. Dr. Bartholomew Strange. Second victim of the case. Nerve specialist and longtime friend of Sir Charles, and head of a sanitarium near his home in Yorkshire. Hermione Lytton Gore. An attractive, young, single woman, known by the nickname of Egg. Sir Charles's love interest, and one of his guests at his cocktail party. Lady Mary Lytton Gore. Mother of Hermione, and a guest at Sir Charles's cocktail party. She seeks a suitable husband for her daughter, and currently faces difficult financial circumstances. Captain de Course. A gambler and a guest at Sir Charles's cocktail party. Cynthia de Course. Wife of Captain de Course. A successful dressmaker and a guest at Sir Charles's cocktail party. Angela Sutcliffe. A well-known actress and a guest at Sir Charles's cocktail party. Muriel Wills. A playwright, also known as Anthony Astor. One of the guests at Sir Charles's cocktail party. Oliver Manders. A young financier who is in love with Hermione. One of the guests at Sir Charles's cocktail party. Miss Violet Milray. Longtime servant to Sir Charles. Mrs. Margaret de Rushbridger. Third victim of the case. Patient at Strange Sanatorium, recently arrived on the day Dr. Strange is murdered. Baker. Strange's regular butler. Ellis. Mysterious new butler at the home of Dr. Strange. Disappears shortly after his employer's death.
Adaptations.
A 1986 television film was made under the title Murder in Three Acts, starring Peter Ustinov and Tony Curtis, which relocated the action to Acapulco, replaced the character of Satterthwaite with Hastings, and made Charles Cartwright an American movie star. An adaptation starring David Suchet for Agatha Christie's Poirot was released as the first episode of Season 12 in 2010, with Martin Shaw as Sir Charles Cartwright, Art Malik as Sir Bartholomew Strange, Kimberly Nixon as Egg Lytton Gore, and Tom Wisdom as Oliver Manders. Ashley Pierce, who previously directed Appointment with Death and Mrs. McGinty's Dead for the ITV series, also directed this. The adaptation omitted the character of Satterthwaite, and changed a number of details but was generally faithful to the plot of the novel. A French adaptation, Drame en Trois Acts, was made as episode 21 of season 2 of the series Les Petits Murders d'Agatha Christie, first broadcast in France on August 21, 2018. A radio production was made for BBC Radio 4 in 2003, starring John Moffat as Poirot, Michael Cochrane as Sir Charles, George Cole as Satterthwaite, Beth Chalmers as Egg Lytton Gore, the heroine, and Clive Mair-Reeson as Sir Bartholomew. The production was broadcast across 5 weekly episodes on BBC Radio 4, and stays predominantly faithful to the novel, with only very subtle changes being made. Swiss publisher Paquette adapted the story as a graphic novel entitled Hercule Poirot, Drame en Trois Actes. The story was adapted by Frédéric Brameau, illustrated by Alberto Zanin, with colors by Fabien Alquier. It was published in March 2022.
International titles. Did you know?
This is the only story in which Mr. Satterthwaite assists Poirot. Usually, he can be found assisting Harley Quin. The first true edition is U.S. publisher Dodd Mead's 1934 publication, which attributes a different motive to the killer but in such a way that other chapters in the novel did not require significant adjustment. The Collins 1935 UK edition is now recognized as the standard. The only other story to differ significantly in the original American edition is The Moving Finger. In the 2009 David Suchet TV film version, the adapter Nick Dear removed Mr. Satterthwaite partly because his name was thought to be too difficult for TV viewers to remember. Thank you for watching. See you again next time.